Welcome to SIIMCast, a podcast brought to you by the Society for Imaging Informatics in Medicine.
Greetings, SIIMCast listeners. Well, this is going to be an interesting episode. It is not our usual format or usual content genre. This episode is mostly talking about Portland. As you know, the SIIM Annual Meeting is coming to Portland in May of this year, 2025. So we figured it would be fun to talk about what's going on in Portland, some interesting things to see. Portland has a bit of a reputation of being a quirky place, and that was part of the reason for this episode. In this episode, we have a guest, Dr. Neel Patel, who's a body imaging radiologist in Portland, Oregon. He's interested in education, colorectal imaging, and ultrasound. Outside of work, he loves hiking, biking, and spending time outside. Additionally, on this episode, you're going to find that our very own Dr. Prasanth Prasanna is playing both host and guest because he is, in fact, based in Portland. And I don't think I need to introduce Prasanth to anyone who is in the SIIM circles. Obviously, he is a doctor by training, but he loves to geek out about informatics. He is one of the co-founders of SIIMcast. And again, in this episode, he plays both host and guest at the same time. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as the four of us, myself along with Jason Dagels, enjoyed taping this. Thank you.
Okay, so welcome to SIIMcast, and we're getting ready and excited for SIIMcast 25, where we're back in Portland, ready to dress like Fred Armisen and kick the Portlandia vibes. And we were just having a conversation with our guest, Neel Patel, and we were hitting him with some hard-hitting questions. Remember last time in 2016 we went to Portland, it was really long lineups for Voodoo Donuts. And then there was another one, Blue Star, I think. So what does a local prefer, Blue Star or Voodoo?
Contentious question, but I'm on the Blue Star side. I like their donuts a lot.
Interesting. Well,
yeah, I think there are even some other ones out when you get out of the city that people like. I mean, Voodoo, of course, it's Voodoo, and they've got the funky stuff. And if you're vegan, they have a lot of the vegan donuts are actually quite good. But after that, I don't know how much it's worth to stand in line for like a couple hours for their donuts.
Yeah, I agree. For dessert, I'd go for like either salt and straw ice cream or pinot gelato, or both.
Salt and straw. I remember me and Kinson standing in the lineup for a long time and enjoying salt and straw. Yes.
Salt and straw is good. One of the best desserts, there's this Jake's Seafood. It's called a chocolate bag. And it looks like a brown paper bag, but it's made completely of chocolate. And on the inside of it is like a bunch of berries and creme fraiche. So, and like the bottom of the bag is like a 1/4 inch thick of chocolate. So it gives you because the Willamette Valley is well known for the berry production. So you get raspberries, blueberries, marionberries, and then everything else. So it's a nice balance between some fruit and a lot of chocolate. That's one of the places I would go for dessert other than salt and straw.
So I guess as the list, just to kind of set the table here. So the listeners are probably like, what podcast am I dialed into right now? This is going to be, I guess, a little different where we're exploring a little bit about Portland. We've got a local representative, plus Prasanth is tangential Portland. Do you consider yourself Portland or Oregon?
It's like if you're in, one of the suburbs of New York or Boston, it's easy just to say, oh, I'm from New York, right? Or Boston, right? I'm just outside of town about 20 minutes, Hillsborough, Beaverton area. That's where Intel and Nike world headquarters are. My new house has a Portland address because I'm outside of the city limits. So that dumps me into unincorporated random Portland, which is funny in many ways. But nonetheless, yeah, it's easy enough to just tell people I'm in Portland.
And Neel, so how about you let us know a little bit about what your raison d'etre is in Portland and what you're up to?
Yeah, I've been here more or less since 2017. I did my radiology residency at OHSU and then did a little study abroad year in San Francisco for my fellowship. That's where I got to know Mark Coley. And then we moved back to Portland, and now I'm attending body imaging radiologist at OHSU. Been here for about 2.5 years, a little more. And I live in Southeast Portland. We actually also just bought a house, and it's a great neighborhood, like near Clinton and Division, just south of Ladd. So it's a really good spot.
Nice. And what is your feeling about all these imaging informaticists descending in Portland in May? Are you excited or are you like, I'm going to hide that week?
No, I'm really happy. I want more people to come see Portland. I believe in Portland. During the pandemic, there were like doom and gloom predictions and news about Portland, but that's really not the reality. I think this is a really great place and a good place to live, a good place to be. I'm excited for people to come and see our city.
Absolutely. I mentioned before that Sim has been to Portland once before. I'm totally blanking out on the year. I feel it was like 2015, 2016.
Yep.
I barely got to venture, but I seem to get like a nice vibe of the city. The local culture is definitely unique. And the way Sim set it up last time, I don't know if this is going to be true this time, is they actually had it scattered around in multiple hotels. And as part of your registration package, you actually got transit passes.
Nice.
So that forced you to take transit. It was, a nice way to see the city, even if you're not trying to see the city.
Yeah, I think that's because we don't, as far as I know, because they did the convention center again, and there's no hotel attached. Kind of like when we go to the Gaylord Hotel convention centers, it's all in one building. So I think it's going to be the same thing where everyone is kind of being a little dispersed, which, it gives it a different feel. It's always nice when we're all in one building together because you run into each other more when, we're in separate hotels. You don't run into each other as much, and that makes it a little tougher. But like you said, it is good to get out and explore around the city. And the convention center's on the east side of the river, and then I guess the quote unquote downtown is technically on the west side. So it would be good for people to get over either side and check out because each neighborhood is very different. It very much is like each area has a different feel. And then not only that, like Northwest 23rd, like we're talking about Salt and Straw, that whole street has a lot of like different shops and things like that. And then you just go a couple blocks to either side and it's just like suburbia. And then you go another distance and then boom, you hit another strip of, some shops and restaurants and things like that. So it very much becomes like these little pockets of things, and it's fun to explore and walk around. And it's a great time of the year since it'll be warmer and less rain. The only downside is it won't be really into berry season yet. So you guys won't be able to go to like the farmers markets and get all of the different berries that you can't get other places.
I remember there being a must-see bookstore. It was a large bookstore. What would that be? Do you recall what I might be referring to?
Oh, I know. Neel, if you want to take this one, go ahead.
Yeah, that's Powell City of Books. It's a great spot. It's easy to get lost in there. The coffee shop in there is one of my favorites too, is Gilder. The coffee is excellent. And yeah, it's a great spot to be. It's easy to wander around and see the books. And I always think I'm going to be able to go in there and buy the one book I want to buy. And I come out with like 2 or 3 extra every single time.
Yep. And so the story with Powell's is, with the big box chains and the internet, Powell's was not doing well, and the city rallied around the bookstore. And not only is it a large bookstore, like City of Books, but it's the largest independent bookstore. You don't see many of these independent bookstores of that size. And the area that Neel is talking about that's their kind of like general, it's almost like a library where you've got all the different categories. They actually have multiple smaller bookstores around town. So if you wanted specifics on like engineering and design, you could go to the engineering and design bookstore and pick up stuff there, or the gardening, or like they have smaller ones that go more specialized.
And just to jump back a little bit, I really think the neighborhoods in Portland are what makes the city. That's like having time to wander around the different small areas is really what makes the city shine. So from like by the convention center just into Northeast, going to like Mississippi, Alberta are both amazing. And then just down into Southeast, Belmont and Hawthorne and Division up and down those streets are really, really fabulous.
Yeah. Yeah. Down in the Southeast area, there's Birdie Time Mini Golf and Pub. It's an indoor 9-hole mini golf and bar. So that's very unique and fun. OMSI's in that direction. That's the Science Center. They always have some interesting things. And they have a decommissioned submarine attached there. It's the USS Buckbeak, which was shown in the movie The Hunt for October as the USS Dallas. So when you see the Dallas coming up out of the water, that's the Buckbeak.
It's interesting. And what you were saying about the berries, I guess 2016, I remember SIIM, I think, corresponded with July 1st. And so it would have been a little bit later. I remember doing a trip, and the berries were for the picking at that time. And my wife came, and there was some wine tours that you can do. They'll pick you up from the hotel, and they're really nice as well.
Yeah, this area is well known for its Pinot. More south of the city, of course, you can get lots of different wine. I don't know, Neil, do you have a favorite vineyard around here or anything like that?
I really like Ovum, does some really good stuff, and the things from Golden Cluster are really good.
Okay.
There's a couple wine shops that serve like mostly Oregon wine.
Mhm.
One is Back Porch Wine on Division. Let me make sure that's the right. I think that's it. And then the other one is up in Northeast, Le Cave. I guess it used to be Le Cave. I can't remember what it is now. Let me just double check that. Oh yeah, same thing. LESCAVES up in Northeast. They serve a lot of local wines. There's great wines about here. Ovum is like my favorite.
Cool. In addition to the wines, we have several whiskey distilleries in town as well. And the Multnomah Whiskey Library is really cool. They've got it set up like an old school library where you have the ladders that go around, only instead of books, they're whiskey bottles. And they have it set up where it's almost like pockets of living rooms. So you've got like a coffee table with some chairs and couches, and then next to it is another coffee table with stuff, so that you are sitting with your friends almost like around the fireplace, around the coffee table, kind of like hanging out. And they are very well versed in all the types of whiskeys. There are a lot of breweries out here, cideries. One of the first sake breweries in the country is here in Forest Grove. So, but it's outside the city, probably about a half hour, 45 minutes. But I've been a member there for a long time. Yeah, so there's, in addition to the booze, there's a lot of food and other stuff too. We got a lot of booze though.
The sake, you said Forest Grove, is that the name of the sake distillery?
It's called Sake One, and they have a couple different brands, and they import several things from Japan directly because they have business relationships with many of the breweries there.
Yeah, I was just going to say, if you wanted to really get out of the town, you could go, and you're a Goonies fan, I guess you could go to Astoria.
Yep. They just ask that you don't gawk, like, because people actually live in the house, right? So they actually try to keep too much traffic and everything else. I've been there, it's kind of nice, but it's a house.
Hey, you guys.
Yeah.
What else would you consider quintessential Portland? We covered the donuts. We talked about the bookstore. We talked about alcohol. What else is quintessential Portland?
I think our parks, like Washington Park and Forest Park, is such a gem, and it's is a really, really beautiful place to be. Just especially in May is so gorgeous. Having a afternoon or morning, whenever you have free, to go into Washington Park and walk from there up into the Arboretum is a really, really special place. Very well done and very well organized, and just is a nice example of both our Northwest trees and ecosystems, as well as some like sort of global arboretum species. So I think that's just lovely. And then over on the east side, Mount Tabor, which is an extinct volcano, so I don't know if it's an old cinder cone, but I think it's part of the boring lava field, which is a geologic formation that Mount Hood created eons ago. It's Mount Tabor is one of the extinct volcanoes, and there's a park on that you can do a bike ride up it or a hike or a picnic. And has a great view down into the city. Oh, and then finally up on the hill, going into Council Crest Park, you can do a lovely hike or drive or bike up there, and you get views of, on a clear day, you can see Mount Hood, Mount Adams, Mount St. Helens, and then Mount Rainier peeks out if it's really clear.
Yeah, I remember correctly, at the top of Council Crest, there's a compass rose.
Yeah.
Where so you can, and it actually has like the placard, so you know exactly which mountain is which. I had done a rotation at OHSU when I'm in my fourth year, and I was wandering, just, like we're talking about, wandering into the neighborhoods, and I stumbled upon that. I'm like, wow, this is really cool. It's a great view of the city. And I think also Mount Tabor has a soapbox derby track, if I remember correctly. Someone was telling me about it the other day. Is that right, Neil? Do you remember?
Yeah, I think it's an event every year where they close the road and have the soapbox derby, which to me just seems like a trauma one waiting to happen. But I think it'd be fun.
Yeah. In addition to some of the stuff that Neil talked about, There's a Japanese garden, a Chinese garden in town, which are great. The International Rose Test Garden is also up on the hill too. And that's where you will see roses of all colors and varieties. It's pretty amazing. Just be careful. Of course, they're going to be bees. One of my friends was like, ha, 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 very funny. And then like she went to go smell a rose, like, oh my God, you weren't kidding. I'm like, no, trust me, there are bees around here, right? So it's always interesting to see like the different winners and stuff. And then if you want to try to get outside of town a little bit, for those people that are into aviation, there's the Evergreen Air Museum. They have the Spruce Goose, which is the largest wooden airplane ever built. And it actually did fly. And it's crazy when you go and look at it, you're like, this thing flew? Like, dang, like you wouldn't think it. They have a great collection of aircraft and rockets out in McMinnville there. And then talking about some of the other parks, there's Silver Falls State Park, which is a bit of a hike, but it's like 8 waterfalls around a 6-mile walking trail, something crazy like that. Multnomah Falls also is a great place to go. It's about a 45-minute drive east of the city. But yeah, there's a lot to be able to see and do in and around the area.
I remember going to those falls and it was part of the wine tour. And it's funny when you're on a bus with a bunch of people that are strangers at the beginning of the wine tour, no one's talking, everyone's strangers. And then by the end, right, everyone's friends.
Everyone's friendly. Yeah. No, it's cool.
If there is extra time, May is the season for balsam roots in the gorge, like the big yellow, almost like sunflower looking flowers. So if there's time, if you have time for like a day trip going out to Hood River or to the Columbia Gorge, and seeing some of the blooms there. Yep. May's prime time for that.
Right. Oh yeah, for sure. Like the coast is the other direction. Jason alluded a little bit to going to Astoria, but you can get out towards like Tillamook, the dairy out there. It's by the water, Cannon Beach, a bunch of different beaches as well. So, you can go basically any direction and you will see a lot of really cool nature or other interesting things you can find.
I'm curious because we talked about food related things. We talked about wine. We talked about donuts. What about actual food? What do you say is quintessential Portland? Anything special that people should look for?
I think Portland is really a pizza town. I think we're very saturated in really, really good pizza. Just to name a few is Turning Peel, Ken's Pizza, Lovely's 50/50, Nostrana are all really, really excellent pizza places. Ramen, we have excellent ramen here, both Marukan ramen and Afuri ramen. Honestly, Afuri ramen makes a vegetarian hazelnut-based broth. And I think that's, in my opinion, that's the best ramen in town. I've tried some of the beef and the chicken and the pork broth, and I think the hazelnut broth is just better.
Yeah, there's out closer towards me, there's a great ramen place. I'm trying to look it up right now to make sure I get the name correctly. And it's a Kazuki Ramen and Izakaya. They are a chain with restaurants in Japan as well. And if you like the soup dumplings, the Taiwanese Din Tai Fung in the Washington Square Mall, with Din Tai Fung is also in Taiwan. So it is very authentic. My Taiwanese friends say, yeah, this is the closest thing you're going to get to authentic Taiwanese food outside of Taiwan. And it is tasty. I think Portland doesn't get as much of a good rap when it comes to the food scene here. I guess, we don't have any Michelin star restaurants, but I guess the Michelin star people don't really come here. So got all these great restaurants, but they're not getting the credit that they deserve, I suppose. You could look at it that way.
I'd say Portland punches above its weight for its size. Mm-hmm. Like for a size of a city, there's so much really, really excellent food and really innovative and exciting and really tasty food in every single neighborhood.
Yep. And it's not just the food trucks either, because everyone knows about the food trucks, but actual sit down restaurants are also quite good.
Eater PDX is a good resource for that. I feel like everything on there I've really enjoyed. And they have it broken up into maps by different neighborhoods. Yep. So you can go to Alberta or to Division or Hawthorne or wherever and go to Eater and see what's on that list, and everything there will be good.
Yeah.
Did I hear you say Alberta?
Yeah. The Alberta Street.
That was my confusion too. The first time he said it, and then I clued in because he named more neighborhoods. So for any listeners who didn't hear this before, myself, Mohammed, and Jason were based in Canada. So yeah, when I hear Alberta, I'm thinking the province. But Neil, to your point, you were saying about Portland punching above its weight. So I actually just quickly Googled the population of Portland is about 630,000 people. I would have never guessed that because, I mean, given the reputation and like all these myths and legends about Portland, I would have never guessed it was 630,000 people. I would have assumed, a couple of million. So yeah, I totally get what you're saying there.
It's a small city and like very neighborhood based. So it's a cool spot.
And also that might just be the Portland proper. I don't know if that's also including when you start getting like Hillsborough, Beaverton, Tualatin, all these other suburbs that are basically part of the megalopolis. I don't know if that's counting that or not.
So I just Googled that, and that's about 2.5 million people. So yeah, I mean more, but still not as big as I would have thought it would be.
Yep. You were talking about things getting confusing with names. So across the river from Portland is Vancouver.
Yep.
Washington. And of course, you have Vancouver, BC, right? So you kind of have to be a little careful sometimes. And there's a town south of the city called Dallas. And then in the city, there's Milwaukee, but it's spelled differently. So
There's
now
stories.
you got to be very careful, and it's very context based.
The 2010 Olympics, there's stories of folks that have, they booked and there was available hotels and they were booking for the wrong Vancouver.
But at least you're not that physically far. You could still drive up if you wanted to.
Yeah, it'd be like a 4 or 5 hour drive, something. Yeah.
5 to 6. Yeah, but I mean, still
5 to
drivable.
6.
For my standards, I like driving.
Well, also, because it's going to be up in Whistler. It's not actually down in Vancouver City, right?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So
But yeah, last time SIIM was in Portland, because I actually flew into Seattle and drove into Portland. I remember the confusion with, what, Vancouver?
Yep. Am I going the wrong direction here? Wait a second.
I'm curious, like some cities, they feel like they're in the shadow of another city. I don't know what that's like because I'm in Toronto, but I'm curious, like, do you feel a little bit, like Seattle's shadow covers Portland sometimes, or does Portland stand alone completely and there's none of that anymore?
I feel like its own thing. I mean, Seattle definitely is like a bigger city and has some bigger companies, but I feel like they're quite distinct.
Yeah, definitely distinct. But so with respect to air travel, I feel like we get overshadowed because we don't have very many international flights out of the Portland Jetport, even though we should, given the size. I think a lot of airlines are trying to consolidate down a little bit. And so now it's got to go to SFO or SeaTac or other places. So from that point of view, I think we get a little overshadowed. But otherwise, I agree with Neel completely. Like, it's its own town. It's got its own vibe. And I don't know. I moved here for a reason. So there are other unique things out in this area. For example, there is a pinball museum. They have pinball and arcade games going back to like the 50s and 60s. So you want to try out some very old and rare pinball stuff, they've got it. I haven't been there yet. And apparently it's like $20 for the day. So you put your $20 down and you can play all day as much as you want. So again, very unique. I've never seen another place that's got that kind of thing. There are like ground control. It's a barcade. I think that's spread over the country more so, but this is one of the first places that was an arcade in a bar. Those kind of things are pretty unique to this area.
So what about work, not just fun, right? What's the scene like? Radiology, informatics. I've heard the name OHSU more times than I can count, so I know it's a powerhouse, but maybe tell us a little bit more about, both OHSU and everything else going on.
For our radiology department, we're growing on a really good group. I'm in the abdominal section, and it's great. Since I was a resident 3 or 4 years ago, in the body division, we've doubled our numbers basically, and so we're growing quickly. We have a really, really supportive, really excellent group, and we do everything body imaging related, of like MRs and CTs, ultrasounds. We do our own ultrasound guided biopsies, CT biopsies, the occasional prostate MRI guided biopsies. I'm not as well versed of the informatics world in OHSU, to be honest, but it's a good spot. We just changed our PAC system with the past year or so to Visage, and that transition is going very, very well.
I was going to say, with all the informaticists being in town, you and your fellow radiologists could be protesting outside our conference, to make things better, fix my UI, that all your problems. This is your chance to complain.
Great.
Seriously. So OHSU actually has a clinical informatics fellowship, if I remember correctly. One of our prior guests, Jim Morrison, he had went through that. He was one of the first winners of the annual
challenge.
The challenge, yes.
Yes.
So yeah,
Innovation Challenge.
Innovation Challenge, yes, exactly. So yeah, hey, go back and listen to that episode. But other than the clinical informatics thing, for radiology, I know LP Riccadelli is up on the Hill, and I've been in contact with him a bunch to get, admin rights for PowerScribe so that I can change our templates. So my hospital is partnered with OHSU, and sometimes those definition of the partnership boundaries are a little bit obscured and unknown. So it creates some interesting dynamics. But LP has been great about, getting us the resources that we need. And, as Neel was saying, we just switched over to Visage, and, whenever my PACS administrator had any concerns, we'd bring them up with LP, and he was made, he also brought it up with the Visage team as well. Like, he was very supportive for any of our concerns to make sure that they were addressed and that we would have a system that would work for both sites. And it just wasn't what OHSU wanted, because their hanging protocols, their system, they have different magnets, so that everything's going to be labeled differently than what we're doing. And so, making sure that everything works well together. And, we have a lot of patients that are going from the community hospital up to the academic hospital and back. So now that we're all on one platform, we can see everything, and it just makes patient care that much better. This was one of the smoothest rollouts I've ever seen. There were just some minor glitches, and that was it. No major anything. The teams did an amazing job making sure that everything would go out correctly. Everyone had the training. They had people on site. You could call up somebody, hey, this isn't quite working that well. Click, click, click. Oh, there's a setting. Okay, let me adjust this, adjust that. And yeah, it's been good.
If you want to feel old, I just looked up when the Jim Morrison episode was posted. It's 2017, so that was 8 years ago.
Yeah, that was the first season, I think.
That was the episode that motivated me to want to co-host. I remember hearing that. And it was just, I remember shoveling snow and listening to that episode and thinking, hey.
Yeah. I don't think I've seen Jim at the conference in a while. He's probably busy with his, kids and being an attending out and everything else out in the real world.
I did see him like a couple of SIIMs ago. I don't remember how many, but yeah, doing well, keeping busy, obviously.
Yeah.
And Jason, I was going to say, you're not helping with feeding stereotypes of what Canadians just say. Shoveling snow, listening to podcasts. I mean, you could have just covered that up by saying I was exercising.
I was exercising, yeah. Trying not to get a heart attack.
Enjoying the fresh air and nature.
No, serious cardio exercise.
Yeah, it is. It is.
On my way to heart attack.
Yes.
I'm curious, Neel. I know you're a radiologist with not a lot in the informatics world. To you, when you hear about a conference like SIIM Informatics Conference coming to your hometown, what does that mean for you? And that's okay if the answer doesn't mean anything. Or, for example, if if any of your colleagues are attending or interested or intrigued by this.
To me, it means, honestly, that my friend Mark Coley's going to come to town, which I'm excited about. And that could be interesting things happening in the workflow and ways that we can make our job easier. Different workflows and tools and technologies that we use to help increase our efficiency.
Okay, so that was going to be my follow-up question. So it sounds like when you and Mark get together, you do talk about work, and he tells you about, for example, some of the things he's doing at UCSF versus, what you're doing at OHSU, right? Comparing notes.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Nice. And then in your case, when you get jealous of some of the cool things they do, you go to your informatics people who are like, why can't we have this?
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. What about you, Prasanth? Now you're in private practice. What does this mean to your day-to-day job? Other than, on a personal front, you're going to go see your friends and buddies.
Well, yeah, I get to hang out with all you guys. It's going to be great. But some of it is also talking with the vendors and finding out what tools are available for us to try to help with our workflow. Just because So I'm working at a 170 bed hospital. So it's not a huge place. It's not a small hospital either, but our volumes have steadily gone up. So like 4 years ago, we were at like 78,000 studies. And then 3 was like 80, 82. And we're on track basically for 90,000 studies this year. Like, and this is every couple of years, like 2, 3. I think there was a $4,000 jump between 2 years ago and last year. So we need help, like just getting through the workflow and like improving things, like the small things, dictation, like the small errors here and there, that starts adding up, right? And I'm not trying to blame any one system or product or anything like that, but these errors, like they add time to anyone's day, right? And then, making sure that the systems are working as well as they can, or finding new tools. Obviously AI tools can be very helpful for fracture detection, this, that, or even like workflow or work list management. So like if it finds a positive study, bump it to the top so it gets read first, kind of thing, right? You'd hate to be sitting on a outpatient CT chest that has PE and it's 4 days old. So, these kind of things, what my group asks for me to try to find, and of course, sitting in on the lectures is great too, because finding out what people have been working on and where the focus is going and understanding what I can do to help my system. For example, last year they had that talk by the hospital that had the data breach, right? So understanding like, yeah, you've got your short-term emergency response, but what about intermediate and long-term? Like you can't go back to fax machines. We don't have them, or they don't have paper, or they haven't been used in so long that now you're using them a ton and they start breaking down. You don't have people running orders back and forth, right? You're not using the tube systems. You don't have a charge nurse who's, like, oh, bed 6 needs blood work. Let me, coordinate all this stuff, right? That doesn't exist anymore. Now suddenly you have to implement. Like, it was really eye-opening to think about having to go back and make sure that all of these things are in place, and that, you have to have all your documentation offline as well, because if your system is down, you're not going to be able to access all the policies and procedures, all of these small things that you might not think about because we're just so used to hop online, do this, do that, right? It's all automated in the background. So now when these processes are no longer there, like, what do you do? It was like downtime procedures on steroids, because it was not just like, oh, we're down for a half hour because something is out. No, the whole system. You can't do billing. You can't pay people, right? Because you don't have no payroll access, like from what this hospital was talking about. So those kind of things are really eye-opening. So go back and like, hey, what are our policies and procedures? What do we have in place? We can learn from other people's mistakes or issues, things that they went through. I don't want to make it sound like these guys made a mistake, right? But we can learn from other people's experiences.
Yeah, it's incredible to think like how fortunate you are to hear a talk like that. Data breaches happen all the time, and just we don't hear about it, and it just gets tucked under. But that's the way to learn, is when people are willing to kind of expose the warts of the experience that they had. But yeah, I remember in my previous job and speaking with the security firm that would manage a lot of the hospitals in Ontario, and it's very common that little things will pop up here and there, and it's just very uncommon that people want to talk about them, and that's really the way that we're going to be able to learn here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like in medicine we have the morbidity and mortality conferences, so that we can learn from these experiences and like how can we make the system better. What do we all need to take away from this kind of thing? And unfortunately, like you said, people don't want to talk about the warts and all, right? But if we don't know, then can't prepare some of these things. So
I'll redirect with a question to Neel, because I actually am genuinely curious. So Neel, again, we informaticists, I know, are slightly weird, but in your case, as you daily practice radiology, what do you feel like your wish list would be? Like if we could relay your message to our friends and community, what would be your wish list? Things that you hope we could help with?
I think better and more accurate dictation with fewer errors, or better error detection, because like spell check doesn't matter if it hears your word wrong. And kind of what Prasanth was saying, even every little thing that it takes like an extra 2 seconds, extra 1 second, totaled up over a course of the day, that adds a lot of time. If even that could be faster, I think that could be huge. For like pulling up automatic priors or being able to sync measurements with dictation software would be awesome. I know has been a thing, it's possible, but be able to pull in measurements from the ultrasound machine, and even if you have multiple different machines, into the dictation software automatically would be amazing. For clinical scanning stuff, like the lung nodule detection, that seems like an easy, relatively low-hanging fruit application. For that, I think those would be interesting for me.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned like the measurements and stuff like that. I mean, we have DICOM SR, and it comes down to if people are going to pay for the interfaces for this stuff to go through, because the machines all have the ability to communicate, but if you don't have the interface to send it through correctly, because PowerScribe can, or many of the other dictation systems can accept it, but people don't want to pay the however much cash it is to get that interface, and it is what it is.
Yeah.
For what it's worth, part of the problem with that specific integration, because I know that one relatively well under the hood, is that integration under the hood is actually clunky. And that's part of the reason why it's expensive, because it's a multi-hub process. Because what you have to have is, sorry, Neel, I'm going to geek out here for a moment. You have to have a piece of software in the middle, an interface engine that can receive the DICOM and then translate it into something else, which then dumps it over to dictation. And then each one of these dictation companies has a different API or interface they use for receiving that information. And that's where things get both clunky and expensive. If you could just send it straight to dictation, it would be a lot easier.
Right. It would be, because that would make things a lot easier and a lot faster, for sure. I'm sure people all over the country would love that to flow through easier.
Yeah, for sure. And then you've also now got newer standards that hopefully will help with this, make it even smoother and hopefully also less expensive. So the newer versions of Firecast, which allow basically synchronization between the application, will in the future allow for measurements to flow straight from the viewer into the report, whether they're measurements that were made by the tech or measurements that were actually made by the radiologist on the spot. They would go into the report right away on the spot. That would be really nice.
It's kind of like the AIM, right? Annotation markup, the old that they were working on a long time ago.
Yeah. Just realize, Neel, this is your opportunity. If you attended the conference, you hear about all the cool things we're kind of hiding away, and then you go to your friends and you tell them you have a crystal ball. We are going to get this in 5 years. All right. Jokes aside, I think we're slowly but surely coming up to time. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time here. Anything else you wanted to leave our listeners to? Anything else you wanted to bring up as far as Portland? Anything related to work?
I hope you all enjoy Portland, and it's a great city. Eat some really good food, go on some lovely walks, see our greenery and the flowers and the plants and everything else here. Go back and tell everyone else to come to visit Portland.
Yeah, it's a great place to be and hang out. Generally, it doesn't get too hot, doesn't get too cold. And I know Mohamed is going to be out a little bit early with his wife, and we're looking to hang out and whatnot. It would be good to show you guys around the area. But look forward to seeing everybody in town and enjoying all the geekiness that we can get into.
For sure. Thank you both. Appreciate it.
SIIMCast has been brought to you by the Society of Imaging Informatics and Medicine. Please visit our website at siim.org for more information and educational content, including webinars and an archive of prior episodes. Please follow us on Twitter at SIIM_tweets. Thank you to our listeners for your continued support.